CancerX グローバルにようこそお越しくださいました。司会進行を務めさせていただきます、久下香織子です。このイベントは英語で行いまして、同時通訳が入りますので、ご了承ください。Thank you for joining us here at CancerX Global. My name is Kaoriko Kuge from Fuji Sankei Communications International, and I will be moderating this session. Apologies for being a couple minutes late. Yes, it's the Zoom age. We have had our technical problems, but everything is clear, so we're going to go ahead with our session. I am here in New York. It's 9:30 p.m. and minus 3 degrees centigrade. It's very cold today, but yes, I am so glad to be here. Now, today we have speakers from Texas, Washington, and Japan, and it's a 1-hour event. So during this session, we will discuss how to close the care gap in developed countries. We speak a lot about developing countries, but in this session, we would like to focus on developed countries. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our 4 distinguished speakers. First, Dr. Naoto Ueno, Professor of Medicine at the University of Texas, MD Anderson Cancer Center, Department of Breast Medical Oncology, a Section Chief of Translational Breast Cancer Research, Executive Director of Morgan Welch, Inflammatory Breast Cancer Program, and CancerX co-founder. Also, Dr. Julie Gralow, Executive Vice President and Chief Medical Officer for ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, a Professor Emeritus of Medical Oncology at the University of Washington School of Medicine. And Mr. Jean-Christophe Barland, Representative Director and President of Bristol-Myers Squibb, Japan. And Mr. Naohiro Manago from the Health Insurance Bureau, Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare. So we will have each speakers express their thoughts first and then move on to the discussion. So Dr. Ueno, can you go first?
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Kaoriko, and it's good to join this wonderful session. So I'm going to spend just several minutes to talk about CancerX and UICC. CancerX was founded about 4 years ago with a 3X concept, and X standing for crossing ideas and sharing ideas and understanding other perspective to collaborate, and X for changes and innovation, and X to cross out cancer. So those are the basic idea of CancerX, and we are currently one of the largest platform for idea exchange in Japan. So World Cancer Week is something that we're hosting for 2022, and our major theme is calling Exchanging Ideas and Sharing Views. So this year we have about more than 100 panelists with 30 different sessions, and our goal is to really understand each other so that we could really make a difference in the society who are suffering from cancer, and we'd like to see cancer patients living to their fullest extent. And particularly this event is aimed for World Cancer Day, which is February the 4th. In Japan, I know it's in February the 5th, and in the US, it's still the 4th. And this is supported by UICC, Union of International Cancer Control. CancerX is a proud member of UICC. And from 2022, UICC, their major theme for another 3 years is close the care gap. And the close the care gap meaning that we'd like to address equity issue or disparity so that everybody deserves the access to the cancer care from different perspective. And this could be treatment, prevention, information, a variety of aspects. And what CancerX Proud is about is not simply about just treatment and prevention, but we really like to have a holistic approach. And considering Japan, 1 out of 2 people have cancer, so really addressing equity issue and how we could move on is very important. There are, as I said, UICC would like to tackle this for over 3 years, and when CancerX is aligned with UICC. And for 2022, the theme is realizing the problem. So this is really about awareness. We really like to understand and talk about the gap that we exist in the developed countries. In 2023, it's uniting our voice and taking action. So we'll take the action and working together by understanding the gap. In 2024, together, we like to challenge those in power, meaning that those people who are really leading the cancer care and treatment and society building. And we really like to have a much more concrete proposal so we could have a paradigm shift. So this CancerX Global is about really understanding from everybody's different perspective. We have wonderful panelists, and hopefully that we have a very interactive session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ueno. Okay, Dr. Gralow, can you take the stand?
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Again, I'm Julie Gralow. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the American Society of Clinical Oncology, or ASCO. And I've been asked to talk about a care gap that we want to close. That's the theme of World Cancer Day, Close the Care Gap. So I thought I would start with the vision of our society. And that is one, I think we can all agree that we would like to aim for this vision, a world where cancer is prevented or cured and every survivor is healthy. How are we going to achieve this vision? Well, I'm going to make the case that we're going to do it through research and clinical trials. Every medical breakthrough in cancer was accomplished through research of some kind. Clinical trials inform our understanding of cancer. They improve prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and supportive care. So we can't advance the field and achieve our vision without research and without clinical trials. Why is access to clinical trials important for patients? This is the care gap that I would like to propose that we try to close. Well, first of all, for a cancer patient, enrolling in a clinical trial can be a very important treatment option. And for some patients with cancer, participating in a clinical trial might be the best treatment choice for them. Also, it's important to have broad representation or diversity in clinical trials to develop treatments that are effective in all patients. We know that different people can have different responses to the same treatment based on age, race, ethnicity, ancestry, socioeconomic status, overall health, and gender. We need the whole diversity in order to be able to better study drugs and tell patients what the side effect from a treatment and what the effectiveness of the treatment will be. And then also, it's important to participate and have access to clinical trials, because participating in a trial, patients can help advance new knowledge and treatments more rapidly, and in turn, they can help future generations and future patients. At the American Society of Clinical Oncology, we're working to have more equitable access to clinical trials and to close that care gap. And one of the ways to do this is something we're calling decentralization, or bringing the trial to the patient. And a strategy that we're taking is we're looking at changes that we made during the COVID-19 pandemic to keep everyone safe and to keep people out of the clinic as much as possible. Can they be incorporated, hopefully as this pandemic winds down, into our routine clinical practice? So we may have learned things from the pandemic that will help us in clinical care and clinical trials in the future. What are some of those things? Well, having remote clinic visits by using telehealth, not making patients come into the cancer center all the time, or having visits and procedures done at local clinics. So if the cancer center where the care and the trial is being done is a long distance away, you could have your blood work done, or you could have an exam closer to home. We also, during the pandemic, sent drugs, especially oral drugs, to the homes of patients and other materials. And as much as we can do that safely in the home, that would be something that we would like to incorporate into standard practice. And then we need to make the clinical trials simpler so that we can have more patients who can participate in trials. So we want to minimize the amount of data collected. So we want to reduce the number of clinic visits and procedures. And then I think we need to leverage technology and have remote and automated interactions, not just telehealth, but actually in the medical record, have it automated so you don't have to, keep saying the same thing over and over. It's automatically put in the clinic and into your records. So these are some of the things we're looking at to try to bring trials to patients. So in conclusion, I'm making the case that one way we're going to close the care gap is to have more research and more trials and more patients able to participate. People with cancer should have equal access to cancer clinical trials, and everyone should be able to benefit from the results of clinical trials. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gralow. Next, Mr. Barland.
Thank you. First of all, I'm absolutely delighted to be participating to this roundtable from sunny Tokyo in the morning. So, and a good evening for our colleagues and friends in the United States. I'm J.C. Barland. I'm the president for Bristol-Myers Squibb in Japan. I have a long involvement in cancer. Previously, before Japan, I was president of BMS France, where I founded the BMS Foundation for the research in immuno-oncology. And I was also the president for the Industry Association, Pharmaceutical Association on Cancer. Japan is a very important place for us at BMS on multiple accounts. From a scientific point of view, as well as the wish we have to impact the society. We define ourselves a mission at BMS, leveraging our science and the vision of transforming patients' lives through science to reach out and impact 2.5 million people by 2023. And I'm glad to report that we are keeping track, and currently we think we have impacted 1.4 million. In terms of cancer and the really strategic direction in which we are currently working, we are very involved in cellular therapies. So we are working very hard to give access to two CAR-T cell therapies in Japan, one for patients suffering from multiple myeloma and one from large B-cell lymphoma. We have a long involvement in immuno-oncology, and I want to once more pay tribute to the scientific ecosystem of Japan and remind us that the PD-1 invention came from Kyoto University, so we have an involvement with Professor Honjo team in Kyoto, and we are also contributing for a donation, and that is the largest donation outside the United States for the BMS building at the at the Center for Cancer Immunotherapies. The issue of access is a very important issue for us worldwide. We are working hard, and probably we'll have the discussion opportunity in the discussion to go into more depth on this. I think it takes my personal experience and background. I've been very involved with pediatric cancer. I think it's a really an interesting field that illustrates a lot of the challenges that we collectively face on this issue, and especially when we are speaking about rare disease or specific cancer affecting a smaller size population. And for me, I would like to conclude on really the importance of and symbolic importance of having us around the table today, because we will not win this battle without cross-functional collaboration, multiple stakeholder engagement. So to have on this round table leading scientists, leading representation of scientific community and people involved in the field of regulatory authority and a member of the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, I think is going to be really important to be able to be successful on what we will discuss today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barland. Now, Mr. Manago.
Yeah, thank you. And my Wi-Fi doesn't work well, so if I shut down, I come back again. And I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak here. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Naoto, for kindly inviting me to speak here today. Let me introduce myself first. I worked as the Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare in Japan, the government of Japan, as the assistant manager. And I joined the minister at 2008 as a policy officer. Since then, I have dedicated on the social security field, and now I'm responsible for managing national health insurance now. But actually, I was responsible for cancer control at 3 years ago. So I would like to talk about my experience of the field of cancer control in the government of Japan. And when I heard today's topic first, I came to mind the information gap. So I would like to talk about the information gap in Japan. So you see my first slide. I would like to start by talking about cancer data in Japan. And actually, cancer control in Japan has made a progress. You see, please look at the bottom left. Cancer has been the leading cause of death in Japan since 1981, but cancer death rate in Japan continues to drop by about 30% between 1995 and 2080. Also, please look at the bottom right. Also, the 5-year survival rate has been increasing in the past few years. It means that people with cancer are living longer than before. So cancer control was improved, so that we have to adjust our society regulation and our mind with that improvement. When you take care of the quality of life for patient more than before, I think. So next slide, please. Thank you. And I would like to about the process of policy making in the field of cancer control in Japan. You look at that slide, right side, you see the Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare. I worked there. The minister played a role in making a strategy of cancer control. The minister makes a national strategy called the Basic Plan to Promote Cancer Control. It includes many policies to cancer control in Japan. Also, we established the council within the government. You see the left side. The council consists of the representative of cancer patient and their family, medical care professional, and academic experts, so on. The government asks the opinion before they make their plan. So this plan reflects the opinion of the council. I think this process makes the strategy more effective and practical. The government can catch up with their needs from the patient and professional and implement the policy based on their needs. And next slide. Next, I'll explain about our national strategy. We call a Basic Plan to Promote Cancer Control has the main goal. People, including cancer patients, learn and overcome cancer. to achieve this goal, we have 5 policies to control cancer. We have a variety of resources related to the cancer control. When we made this plan first time 10 or 20 years ago, we focused on the patient treatment and quality of care. Now we have during third period of this plan, we expand policy target to include the public, people who have no idea of cancer. However, some people reached out that support, but others don't. I think there is an information gap between the patient and their family. I think there are some reasons for that. First, there are a lot of information on the internet, SNS, when you look into the cancer. And it is hard for us to tell something right and wrong based on the scientific evidence. Also, this is because patients are sometimes isolated from friend co-worker community when you see find the cancer at first. So it is difficult to find the right support from the internet or your friend. So next slide, please. So in my opinion, to reach out the patient from isolated from the community and connect them with support from the professional, we can use the social capital. The social capital is defined by the OECD. You see the definition here. Network together with shared norm, value, and understanding that facilitate cooperation with or among groups. It is difficult definition, so I just say it's simple. Just say neighborhood in your community. Actually, patients have their own needs depending on their situation. People around us is the resource to find your problem and help you. And to improve the social capital in your community, I think that people need to take interest in cancer. The more people pay attention to the cancer, the more chance we can get to help each other. So I recommend the social capital is one solution to catch up the patient and help each other. Thank you for listening my remarks.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like to open our discussion. First, if there's any questions from the speakers, please feel free to speak out. First of all, I would like to ask Mr. Manago that Dr. Gralow was talking about how to make the clinical trials available to everybody, and she had the remote system. The way she was trying to do this was to rely heavily on the remote system, which everybody needs to be having a very good internet access, and the reach out using the remote system. Do you feel the Japanese remote system is capable of doing this?
Yes, remote access is very important for us, for especially equal access. So we gave us a lot of information from the government about the clinical trial. So if you want to join the clinical trial, you can ask the doctor, and the doctor check out the information from the government or authority from the medical professional. So I think it is easy and you can use it, but I think the problem is that patient doesn't have a time to check it yourself. So I think a lot of people need to take care in cancer and clinical for your friend or community. So if if you have a lot of people take care interest in cancer, we have a chance to get help each other. So information is important, but connection or linkage is also important, I think.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gralow, I totally agree with you especially because with the 2 years experience of COVID, we now have a better understanding that we need drugs that work around the globe, not only in America, but also with Asians and African Americans and to everybody, needs to work with everybody, which probably leads to the importance of diversity of clinical trials. Now, I've been living in America for a while, but when I was in Japan, I was not aware of this clinical. It was not something that usual person would think about, a clinical trial. If a doctor comes to me and said, would you like to do a clinical trial? It would not be an easy answer, especially for a cancer patient who is already scared and very tired. How do you think a doctor would be able to persuade a patient like that to be in a clinical trial? And also, can you tell me how safe is clinical trial?
So there are several great questions that you just asked. And the first is, I think even in the United States, most patients diagnosed with cancer don't think about a clinical trial as a first step. So there's education that needs to occur. I think in my experience, gaining trust of the patient, having other patients, so a patient advocate, we would say, who is more relatable to the patient, who has the patient's trust, they can help explain the trial. A trial is not right for everyone, but with good explanation, answering questions, absolutely. It can take a couple of visits sometimes to answer all of the questions. And with partnership and the help of patients who went before them and that kind of support, I think that we can be more successful than we are in enrolling patients in clinical trials. We also, you asked about how safe they are. We have to make sure that they're safe and explain all of the safeguards that have been put in place to protect the patient. And we have independent groups that are overseeing the trials and all of the data and everything that's happened, and they can shut the trial down if there's a problem. We have obligations to meet certain standards and training all of the time in the standards that we have to meet. And then we're audited, we're to make sure that we're keeping the records and that we're keeping things right. But a big part of that is explanation, education, but trust, gaining the trust of the patient and spending the time that it takes to answer the questions. And I'll also just briefly touch on the question you asked about the telehealth and remote and the internet accessibility. As you're aware, you live in the US now, we have pockets without good internet accessibility, especially out in very rural areas. And what we found is if a patient lives a long distance from a cancer center where they're getting their treatment or they might be enrolling in a trial, they probably have some place, a little local clinic or something that's not too far away where they could go for a good internet connection. And so for many of our patients, they don't need to drive the 100 miles all the way to the cancer center, but they could drive to a local clinic who would enable them to set up and use the internet to connect remotely. So that's one way that even if patients don't have it in their home, that we've enabled a lot more use of telemedicine.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barland, our speakers today they're working very globally and they know a lot about a lot of countries. But since you live in Japan and you work in Japan, what do you think is something that Japan can change in order to make this situation better, where care is so much, where the care gap can be abolished?
So first of all, I would say looking at the situation in Japan and comparing with the rest of the world, I would say the baseline situation is not bad. when you look at the outcomes on a lot of cancer types, actually, as we saw in the introduction, there has been remarkable progress, and these are actually driven by multiple zones on which Japan can leverage further and improve. I would say, first of all, I'm not so sure that there are some Japan-specific issues. I think the issues that we face in Japan are more or less the same everywhere. A big piece is around asymmetry of information, and that's why we need to work together collaboratively to make sure that we use multiple channels, multiple platforms, multiple technologies to convey a message, a very powerful message about the availability, for example, of clinical trials, the importance of clinical trials. There is not in communication, there is not one magic bullet and one size fits all. So it's really what pays off is the consistency and the breadth and depth of the messages. I think that's really important. I think creating awareness of situation, of potential zones or improvements are also an important target. Raising the importance of the issue, keeping raising the importance of the issue to multiple stakeholders. That's really, really important. I think the industry has a role to play as well when we embark on clinical trials to ensure that the diversity is also represented in clinical trials. So as a matter of fact, BMS in the US, for example, has embarked on a program over 5 years, investing $150 million to actually include diversity and inclusion in clinical trial. And that involves the training of 250 promising clinical investigators who are representative from diversity groups. So maybe there are some similar issues that can be similar ways of working that could be developed in Japan as well. And the last piece, and I think this roundtable is really interesting for that as well, is sharing best practice, learning from what is working in specific country, not working so well, so that we don't reinvent the wheel and we can push further and faster.
Share information.
Very important.
Dr. Ueno, because we are talking about developed countries, each one of us have so much information. If we go to the internet, there's so much information, but about everything. And if I were a patient, it would be very difficult to shuffle and see which information is for me, or which is even true or false. It is just there's so much information. What should we do about that?
So I don't have a good answer to it, but I was listening to JC and Julie and then Naohiro's talk, and I totally agree with what they're saying. And I'm just going to experience it as a patient's perspective. So I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I had a pre-leukemia called MDS, and I had IDH2 mutation. So I actually went through phase 1 IDH2 inhibitor study. But the thing is, actually, I didn't even know this stuff existed actually. And this was not because of my doctor, but it was just completely accidentally I found out. And as a patient, I'm an academic physician and still couldn't figure out what to do about it. I'm just, so either I'm stupid or, I was missing the information, and then I'm just going to share this that, Julie, in ASCO, there's this patient advocacy booth, right? So I went to the patient booth and asked a question. So I couldn't get any information about it either. And then at the end, I found, I was looking for something alternative that will help me to live longer. And then, of course, the phase 1, in my case, it didn't work you know, I had toxicity, but it didn't work out, and I ended up going transplant to cure my disease. But you know, Kaoriko, I mean, it's a tough question. I don't know my, you know, issue of not getting into the right path. Is that because of, I think it's nobody's fault. I'm not blaming anybody, but it is challenging. Is it really the system? Is it my, you know, information gathering? It's multiple factors that's actually, you know, result in easily into equity issue or inequality issue that I face actually. So that was my experience, and I don't think I'm answering your question, but
no. I feel good that even a doctor like you had a difficult time gathering the correct information.
right.
As a patient, what do you think one can do in order to reach out to the best information?
I think somebody was saying that you have to speak with multiple people. I mean, I think there's no one person who could give everything is something I learned. So you talk with one person, and this is not about just second opinion. I mean, talking with different doctors, but talking with patient advocacy, reading pharmaceutical companies, you know, brochure or something. It's a multiple angles that seems to, and because if you read a textbook, when I was a patient reading the book, and I know that I have knowledge, but the textbook, the knowledge is already old. So the latest stuff really comes from more, like you just said, internet or pharmaceutical companies, you know, additional information. So I don't have a real clear answer, but you really have to each reach out to a variety of different people. And I think, to me, pharma and ASCO or government or whatever, everybody has to really provide the information from multi-perspective approach. That's kind of what I think. Yeah.
I guess
I don't know what Julie and JC and other you guys all think about this. You know.
Well, I was thinking that Naoto, even though you know you're an oncologist and you struggled with this, but you felt like you needed to be the expert, and I think that's what most people feel. But I really think that picking a team, and I agree, it can't just be one person, but picking a team that you trust and that you feel comfortable with is the kind of the best approach in a lot of ways, because that team will have trained and studied for years and years and years, and they're experts in it. And if you trust their information, then you don't feel like you need to second guess everything or to 100% understand the 200 treatment options you might have had and narrow it down to one. You know, they could narrow it down to a few to discuss with you. So I do think that a lot of my patients feel like they need to all of a sudden become, I'm a breast cancer doctor, a breast cancer expert. But really, you need to understand enough to make an informed decision that's right for you, but you don't need to understand everything about breast cancer in 2 weeks after you're diagnosed.
Right.
Mr. Barland?
Yes, I completely agree with what has been said. Maybe I will apply to this question an answer I believe in broad dimension of life is the magic of asking. Stay curious, be curious, don't give up, ask questions. Do not assume they are stupid questions or naive questions. Ask the questions, and I really, you create after a certain steps, I think, a kind of mind lines that really help to progress. So I think this is a dimension important, especially in some Asian culture, because of maybe the relationship between the patients and the physician is different than in the West. There's maybe a little bit more shyness about even collecting a second opinion or doing your own research. So when we speak about diversity, I think this is an element that is also important, is to really make people feel comfortable, to have the psychological safety to allow themselves to be curious, to research, to discuss, with many people before they can find the right solutions.
I like the word psychological safety. I think that's something that a patient should be feeling, but it's very difficult to feel. Mr. Manabe, as from the government side, what do you think you can do in order to realize what the doctors right now are talking about, having the time and the kind of relationship with the doctors and being able to talk to them. And I think time is a huge issue. Doctors are just so busy, especially in the rural areas. That person may be the only doctor in town and they're very busy. And is there anything that you may be able to do as a government?
Yeah, actually, it's very important thing for especially patient. Time is very important because at first patient had a lot of shock and in great deal of pain. So it is not time to advise them. I think we need a lot of resource outside the hospital and we need to access to
I think he just
friends educated cancer. I want to share my experience near my house. Actually, there is a cafe running by a social worker. He's a specialist.
Mr. Manago, you just froze. Dr. Ueno, are you here?
I'm here, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's wait for Mr. Manago to come back. And until then, Mr. Ueno, do you have any comments on the doctor-patient time and the relationship in Japan?
You're asking me?
Yes.
You mean the patient and physician relationship?
Yes, yes. Well, what do you think, what can a patient do in order to be able to create that kind of relationship
Sorry.
with it? Oh, there you go.
I came back, sorry. My hair doesn't work. I introduced cafe near my house.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So
actually, I didn't notice him before. I didn't pay attention my community, but it's a good place to come together. He gave us a lot of program related to disease or child care. So if you have a problem, you can go there and talk about your problem. And sometimes he find out the people who have been difficult and he finds them and brings them to the support from the government or local government or a medical professional. So if you pay attention to your community, you have a lot of people who you believe them. I think so. Doctor is not the only option to help you. So I need to improve your community and educate your community to improve your quality of life as a patient.
I see. Thank you. Dr. Ueno, were you starting to say something?
Yeah, well, I think that, it's really important as a patient to understand what the physician is trying to say. And, a lot of times that even myself, when I get bad news, I'm probably not listening to it. And my wife is pretty much listening more than myself, actually. So I think really getting that, way to communicate it effectively by getting others help, either that's really writing a note or really getting other people involved is really important. I found out myself that I'm get biased. When it's a good news, everything comes in, but when it's a bad news, everything is kind of,
I see. Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Barland, you specialize in pediatrics. When it comes to pediatrics, I think parents are even more careful and more skeptical, and you need more time to talk to them. Do you think there's something that the doctor or the patient can do in order to improve the relationship, or even the mindset, to change the mindset?
Well, first of all, I would say each time I meet and work with a physician involved in the field of pediatric cancer, I have to tell you, for me, it's a formidable source of inspiration and energy. So we are speaking about people really who are working in a tremendous way to try to improve a very complex situation, because if you look at pediatric cancer, this is really a situation that is particularly difficult because it's a very big problem. It's actually one of the leading causes of death for children. But at the same time, fortunately, the numbers of young patients and children are not really high, so that it's raising a lot of issues to actually ensure that we can channel the science, channel the efforts. All the questions we have debated today, they are magnified, I think, in the field of pediatric cancer. We speak about awareness about clinical trials. My God, it's really difficult. We speak about inclusion of children in a clinical trial, early assets. This is also particularly challenging because there is, unfortunately, probably not enough. So I think the difficulties and the challenges that the community face, and I like to think it this way, the physicians, the family, the caregiving units, and the industry, really challenging. And it's really, I think, by thinking in terms of coalition of people who are actually wants to move the needle, and that's really important to create, I would say, the ecosystem in which we can improve things. I think there is the way, for example, we look at it in BMS Japan is we think about 3 types of zones in which we can collaborate. One is what we call cure, so it's really on the core of trying to bring assets and clinical solutions. One is care. So how can we actually help beyond the drug? So for example, going directly into your question, breaking the isolation of children in cancer wards by using telepresence robots, technology that helps to maintain the social links between a child, his family, or the school, or his friends. And the last one is mobilize. So how can we actually work with other partners in the healthcare industry, with the patient association, with leading scientific communities, with regulators, to create a more favorable ecosystem for the field.
Thank you. Dr. Ueno, I think this care gap within the developed countries, it's such a great theme, because I was looking through the internet and I can find like a survival gap between developed countries and developing countries, but I could not find any kind of study that would focus on one country and compare the income of the family or where they live in the metropolitan or the rural areas, and comparing the survival rate of cancer of the population of these within the country. What do you think is one of the most important things that they should do?
Well, what I think the most important thing is that you recognize that the gap could happen very easily. And it could happen in a developed country, even with a resource, because of information, infrastructure, location. And it's more than we think the gap exists. And it's a little bit more prominent in the United States because of the socioeconomical gap is quite larger than Japan. I think Japan is a little bit more homogeneous in that sense. However, I think all the developed countries, France, United States, Canada, Japan, I think they have same issues. I think JC was saying that regardless of the location of the developed country, we have the same issue, but whether that's recognized is a completely different thing. So I think we need to increase awareness, and also it's important to speak with the patients and the caregiver because they could give a perspective of what they think is a gap. And it may not be that the healthcare provider, like or researchers, we may not be recognizing it. So I think reaching out and trying to understand is going to be very important.
Thank you. Now we have about 6 more minutes left. Mr. Manago, do you have some last thoughts?
Yeah, I think cooperate with other section is cooperating with each other section is very important because I'm a government, I work in the government, but I have no experience with cancer. So I need to catch up the experience, a variety experience from the patient and their family. And we have to reflect their opinion on the policy, especially we implement a lot of policy. So actually we keep communicating with each other and improve the quality of life for patient. That's the key. Cooperation is the key to improve our life and change our life better.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barland, last thoughts?
Yes, I really liked what Julie said in our introduction about what did we learn from COVID and how could we leverage that. As an industry observer, I think that one thing that has been absolutely extraordinary is the speed at which RNA vaccines could be developed. And I think as an industry and as a healthcare society, we have to learn from that because this has been achieved via an extraordinary collaborative work. Genetic information has been shared very fast. People who usually don't maybe work together have collaborated, you know, and manufacturing. The regulators also have looked at the process with extra urgency. I think as a society, frankly, what has been achieved has been really remarkable. Who could have actually believed that you could develop vaccines for COVID in such a remarkable amount of time? So I think there is a lot of interesting insights we can collect from this collective venture, and that I think we should be very keen to actually apply to the field of cancer and the formidable challenges that we face against these incredible nasty disease. So I think COVID and the transformational change that it has brought will give us some interesting avenues. So I want to finish this session with a message of hope, saying that we will all work relentlessly to improve our game and try to do this. So thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Dr. Gralow?
Well, to follow up on JC's comments, I think another thing that we learned from COVID, and maybe this was more prominent in the United States than in Japan, but we need to do better with the misinformation. So we talked about how there's so much information that you can get, but there's a whole bunch of it that is wrong, and but it's labeling itself as evidence. And so we need to do better at how we present evidence and how we tackle the misinformation. And this happens certainly in COVID and around the vaccines, but also around cancer and cancer treatment. So that's number one. If we're looking for what do we need to do better, we have not figured that out yet. But I think to get the best outcomes and to have the best chance of giving the best care and closing the care gap, I think the themes that we've talked about of teamwork and collaboration and partnerships, the patient is part of a whole team. It's not just a doctor and a patient, but there's a whole team on the clinical side, the nurse and the nutritionist and the physical therapist and the social worker. And on the patient side, there are the family members and the friends. And there's the power of peer-to-peer support. The patients who have gone through this already and are there and willing to be the support and talk about their experience and how did they make decisions. I think part of the teamwork has to be that we're partnering with patients, absolutely. And that's how we're going to close the care gap and get the best outcomes for everyone.
Thank you. Dr. Ueno?
I don't have really something really new to add, but I think we need to have this kind of global session to talk about issues that we face in each of the countries. Tendency that we focus on our domestic agenda and having only domestic agenda discussed by domestic panelists. And I think this is really good to hear other perspective from other countries or people who do completely different things. So I feel that we really should spend more time to have an international that would tackle the same issues, because I think there's more similarities than the difference. And I think it will help us to really go to the next level of cancer care.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent discussion. And this CancerX is, yes, giving this platform for us to talk about from all over the country and all over the world, which is such a great platform. And I hope these kind of discussions happen more frequently. We're running out of time, and that wraps up our session of CancerX Global. We hope you all had a meaningful time just as much as we did. Thank you for joining us. CancerX Global にお越しいただきありがとうございました。これにてこのセッションは終了させていただきます。失礼いたします。Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.